if you look at the committee going to COP, it's not just the whole team from agriculture. We recognize that we need some rules, issues of rights, issues of gender, climate change, issues of youth, climate change. So you find that even people who do not belong to agriculture are on the delegation. The same with all these topics, that it may be led by your committee, but the composition may include other players. Some are included just for their own passion on the topic. If you look at it, I'm not suggesting that the name will go on the list, but if you look at how Honorable Matola Motsheka's passion throughout these motions, in some cases you are persuaded, although he belongs to the Committee on Education, to include him on that team, because he will be a sharpshooter. And for that reason, the composition may not be exclusively one committee. We will also look at other skills. I think we are done to that extent. And these resolutions, can I suggest, one weakness of ourselves as PAP previously, we just resolve in the plenary, and then we take the documents to our offices and it ends there. Can we have the leaders of delegations deliver these resolutions like on Mozambique? We need to write ourselves as PAP to the government of Mozambique and advise that we had this on our program, we debated and resolved, and this is delivered to His Excellency the President of Mozambique and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The same with Zimbabwe. You deliver that what we have resolved here needs to be delivered. If we had money, of course, the move of the motion would accompany the delegation. But maybe because we are poor in some cases, if we will be rich, who knows, maybe by Monday next week we'll be rich. If we will be rich next week as a parliament, we may say the mover and the delegation or leader should deliver these motions to Uganda, to Mozambique, to Zimbabwe, to Ethiopia, DRC, even Rwanda, so that these are the deliberations. Mozambique, you want to take the floor? Okay. Okay, I'll come to you.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and we already concluded, but I'm intervening. I apologize. Chairperson and honorable members, this debate we are having is very interesting, and it is the most difficult one when we are coming to the final analysis of the resolutions. And if you allow me, Honorable Chair, but we'd like to commend our drafters to this report. I think that they have done at least 90%, and it is the 10% that we are correcting. And we are running a great risk of opening the debate on the resolutions, but as I am following this orientation from you, Honorable Chairperson, to be handed to our presidents, it is important that plenary approves the resolutions. And I think that the corrections are minor. And on our case of Mozambique, we do not have to present the motion that PAP has already debated. So we have to include from Professor Matola, we should present it to the United Nations so that we can do it in 2-3 minutes and approve. But as a parliament here, we have to have the resolution and not postpone it and not to open it to debate. If we have another debate, it shall be another time. But for now, we should conclude this process, and I repeat that we do thank the work that has been done by our colleagues. So 90% yes has been done. This is my proposal. Thank you.
The motions will go to the various countries that we are promoting their interests. The motions will go to the regional leaders, like Chair of SADC. They also need to see that there's a parliament, we are supporting them. They encourage them in their efforts. So like SADC has declared 25 October every year as the unsanctioned day for Southern Africa or for the world. So it's all proper that the Chair of SADC also is presented with this motion, that they know that PAP is doing something. The AU, UN, EU, everybody, like you said, will also receive, and the delegations should go. And the media, today, I don't know how you're going to structure it. You need to move motion by motion. Resolutions on this country, resolutions on this country, because we need the world to know that PAP is alive and making a contribution. Mr. Clerk, I need to announce the issue of...
President, I'm sorry you recognized me. Just a small issue.
Is it small or big?
Very small, half a minute. I fully endorse what my comrade from honorable member from Mozambique said, that we must just conclude the matters. But on Uganda...
Now, you are saying conclude.
Yeah,
you have concluded. Now you are saying, but another issue.
No.
You are contradicting yourself, because you say, let's close, but you are opening.
No, we close that one, and I just make a correction, quick correction.
Okay.
On the resolution on Uganda, the formulation on paragraph 5 is wrong. We say emphasize the need for all African countries to uphold the human rights of all people. The problem in Uganda is not the violation of the human rights, is the non-recognition of the rights of the people of Uganda and Tanzania to enjoy their social and economic rights. So I propose that we say on 5, reaffirm the duty of all states to respect the rights of the peoples of Uganda and Tanzania to enjoy their economic rights. Thank you.
To be honest with you, I did not understand the mischief that you are correcting. What did they say in this draft?
Emphasize the need for all countries to uphold the human rights of all people. I'm saying the context of this resolution does not deal with the violation of human rights of anybody, but it deals with the denial of the right of Ugandans and Tanzanians to enjoy their economic right by introducing the pipeline. But I'll leave that in your good hands, decide as you wish, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, where are we?
Monsieur le Président, nous sommes...
Mr. President, thank you. We are on the draft resolution for the ratification and implementation of the additional protocol to the African Charter on human and people's rights on the rights of women in Africa, and it's called the Maputo Protocol.
On the motions, there was a motion on calling for the immediate end of the DRC conflict, which, sorry? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable President. Honorable President, can we be allowed to make those additions on the resolve part and bring it later when all other motions are done to avoid delaying this House? We are busy trying to assist in terms of putting all the resolve as per the House debates.
Okay. So we proceed.
Merci.
Very much. Resolution for the ratification and implementation of the additional protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, which is called the Maputo Protocol. The Pan-African Parliament decides as follows: to support the activities of the African Union to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Maputo Protocol and advocacy activities to ensure universal ratification in the 12 member states that remain.
Élaborer une stratégie visant à mobiliser
Draft a strategy to mobilize and encourage ratification by the parliaments of the 12 member states as follows, who have not yet ratified the Maputo Protocol. That is Botswana, Burundi, the Democratic Republic, the Central African Republic, I beg your pardon, Chad, Eritrea, Madagascar, Morocco, Niger, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan. The third aspect is to enhance the role of women parliamentarians relating to the African Union's peace and security programs by involving the Pan-African Parliament women parliamentarians in solidarity visits, as well as fact-finding missions in conflict areas in conjunction with the African Union Special Envoy. We have number 4, which is to ensure that each member state establishes and strengthens the National Steering Committee at the national level for the UNSCR 1325. 5 is to support the involvement of the Caucus on Women in the drafting process, that is, of the Convention on Violence Against Women, and this will be enacted later. Its ratification campaign will be at national level as well as its popularization. 6 is to support the 16 Days of Activism campaign against gender-based violence, which begins on the 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and continuing until the 10th of December, the International Human Rights Day. Adopted at Midrand, 10th November 2022.
Adopted.
projet de résolution relative à la table
Resolution on the round table on advancing democratic governance through the implementation of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, ACTEG, and enhanced citizen engagement. The Pan-African Parliament decides that, 1, that the Pan-African Parliament intensifies its engagement with member states to ensure ratification and domestication of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Secondly, that the Pan-African Parliament intensifies awareness raising and sensitization of state and non-state actors on AU shared values instruments. Third, that the Committee on Cooperation, International Relations, Conflict Resolution engages with relevant stakeholders to accelerate the use and deployment of civic technology in advancing democratic governance principles and engaging citizens. Fourthly, mandates the Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution to continue to engage with the technical arm of the African governance architecture so as to ensure implementation of the AGA platform programs. And this is adopted in Midrand, South Africa on the 10th of November 2022. Draft resolution on labor and migration. The Pan-African Parliament hereby decides as follows. 1, to facilitate advocacy and capacity building of the Pan-African Parliament, regional and national parliaments on labor migration. 2, disseminate and popularize African Union, regional economic communities, and international legal instruments on migration and labor mobility. 3, strengthen existing collaborations and lobby other key stakeholders to advocate for the ratification and incorporation of relevant legal instruments into the national legal system. 4, gather information to monitor and evaluate the state of ratification and implementation of relevant legal instruments by member states. 5, promote ratification of international human rights and labor instruments and incorporate these instruments into the national legal system of the member states. 6, champion the main legal instruments of the AU, the regional economic communities, and international instruments on migration and labor mobility among member states. And 7, relay its activities to national parliaments. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Resolution on the African Continental Free Trade Area. The Pan-African Parliament hereby resolves to urge Pan-African parliamentarians of countries which have not yet ratified the AfCFTA agreement to raise awareness amongst their governments to ratify the agreement. 2, also urges parliamentarians to advocate with their states so as to sign and ratify, where applicable, the protocol to the treaty establishing the African Economic Community relating to free movement of persons, right of residence, and right of establishment. 3, calls on its parliamentarians to sensitize their respective countries to create intersectoral national communities for the AfCFTA, led by the ministries in charge of trade, to coordinate national actions in implementation of the AfCFTA and to collaborate with the AfCFTA Secretariat and the private sector. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the adoption of the model law on food and nutrition security in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament hereby resolves as follows: to 1, adopt the model law on food, nutrition and security in Africa; 2, commend the Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, Natural Resources and Environment and the Pan-African Parliamentary Alliance on Food and Nutrition Security for the effective execution of the mandate received from the plenary. 3, request the Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, Natural Resources and Environment and the Pan-African Parliamentary Alliance to continue advocacy and other initiatives for food and security and strengthen the capacities of parliamentarians in Africa for an enabling environment for food security and nutrition, including the right to adequate food in Africa. 4, welcome the continued technical support from the Food and Agricultural Organization and the fruitful collaboration between the Pan-African Parliamentary Alliance and the Food Security and Nutrition, the Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, Natural Resources and Environment, and other relevant stakeholders which contributed to the successful formulation of the Model Law on Food and Nutrition Security, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the Model Police Law for Africa. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves to request that members of the Pan-African Parliament assist the Committee on Justice and Human Rights to disseminate the Model Police Law for Africa. B, encourage all relevant organs of the African Union to promote the Model Police Law for Africa and use it to promote all matters related to policing in Africa. C, call on African Union member states to review their policing legislation against the Police Model Law for Africa and to make all necessary amendments to their legislation so as to promote alignment with the model law. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on elimination of harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks. The Pan-African Parliament hereby resolves to 1. Adopt the report and the preliminary guidelines for parliamentarians. Accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks towards eliminating harmful practices and other human rights violations. 2. Work with parliaments of the member states of the African Union to take concrete measures to condemn and end the harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, which results in human rights violations, particularly against people with disabilities, particularly people with albinism, women, children, and older persons. 3. Also work with the parliaments of the member states of the African Union to adopt and implement recommendations made in the report and preliminary guidelines to ensure the elimination of harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, and to protect all persons, particularly marginalized groups, who are vulnerable to these harmful practices. 4. To engage with the member states of the African Union to ensure that no one within their jurisdiction is deprived of the right to life, liberty, or security of persons because of harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attack, and that no one is subjected to exploitation, violence, torture, or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment or arbitrary arrest or detention on that account, and to bring to justice all perpetrators of violence or violations, of these rights. 5. Collaborate with other organs of the African Union and international organizations to promote these preliminary guidelines and collaborate on initiatives to support the protection of all persons vulnerable to harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks, noting that in providing protection, attention to local context is critical. And 6, acknowledge the technical support received from the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria, in collaboration with the United Nations independent expert on the enjoyment of human rights by persons with albinism, which made possible the development of the preliminary guidelines for parliamentarians' accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022.
Adopted. We move.
Résolution sur la promotion et la
Resolution on the promotion of ratification of the Protocol on Persons with Disabilities and the Protocol on Older Persons. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves to 1. Intensify parliamentary advocacy and engagement for the ratification, domestication and implementation of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of persons with disabilities, and popularize the model law on disability adopted by the Parliament. 2. Strengthen the collaboration and exchange of experiences among regional and national parliamentary bodies with a view to enhancing the capacity of the parliamentarians to monitor and integrate disability in all public policy and program areas, as well as budget and lawmaking. 3. Mandate the Committee on Gender, Family, Youth and People with Disability to promote the ratification and domestication of the Protocol on the rights of older persons, which will enable them to enjoy human rights and fundamental freedoms and to participate in social activities, and to pursue all relevant opportunities for the full implementation of its mandate. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the formulation of a model law on labor migration in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves to 1. Approve the request made by the Permanent Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration Matters to develop a model law on labor migration in Africa. 2. Increase parliamentary advocacy and engagement for the ratification, domestication and implementation of all International Labour Organization conventions and the African Union protocols relating to the governance of labour migration in Africa. 3. Welcome the collaboration of the International Labour Organization to jointly work with the Permanent Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration Matters on the following 3 priority thematic areas. These are: enhance the labor protection of migrant workers, boost bilateral labor migration agreements, and extend social protection to migrant workers in Africa. 4. Request the Permanent Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration Matters to ensure that the relevant department of the African Union Commission and other relevant stakeholders participate in the process of formulation of the model law on labor migration in Africa. 5. Mandate the Permanent Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration Matters to proceed with the formulation of the model law on labor migration in Africa, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022.
Adopted. We move.
projet de résolution sur l'élaboration
Draft resolution on the formulation of a model law on gender parity in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves to 1. Intensify parliamentary advocacy and engagement for the ratification, domestication, and implementation of the Protocol to the Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women. 2. Strengthen the collaboration and exchanges among regional and national parliamentary bodies with a view to enhancing the capacity of parliamentarians to monitor and integrate gender equality in all public policy and program areas, as well as budget and lawmaking. 3, formulate a model law on gender parity in Africa through the Committee on Gender, Family, Youth and People with Disability as a means to fast-track the harmonized implementation of the new Women's Decade on the continent. And 4, mandate the Committee on Gender, Family, Youth and People with Disability to work with all technical partners and all relevant institutional stakeholders, including civil society organizations, in the formulation of the proposed model law on gender parity, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the promotion of African Union 10-year action plan to eradicate child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves as follows. 1, intensify parliamentary advocacy and engagement for the ratification, domestication and implementation of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights and welfare of the child, so as to ensure the protection of their rights and development. 2, provide a platform through consultations to raise awareness on manifestations and threats of child labor and human trafficking at national level, and to share experiences among all stakeholders, both in regard
Donner mandat à la Commission.
3, mandate the Committee on Health, Labour and Social Affairs to promote the ratification and domestication
Mise en œuvre du plan d'action décennal sur les Je reprends. Donner mandat à la Commission permanente de la santé, du travail.
mandates the Committee on Health, Labour and Social Affairs
Donner mandat à la Commission permanente de la santé.
3, mandate the Committee on Health, Labour and Social Affairs to promote the ratification and domestication of the Protocol on the Rights and Welfare of the Child through the implementation of the 10-year action plan on eradication of child labor, forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking in Africa. To work with the African Committee of Experts on the Rights of the Child, the national parliaments and the regional parliaments and other partners to ensure the promotion and protection of the rights and well-being of the child. Midrand, 10 November 2022. The fourth, Mr. President, the fourth item is not included in the English. Draft resolution on the formulation of a model law on statelessness. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby recommends to 1. Intensify parliamentary advocacy and engagement for the domestication of legislation that spell out safeguards against statelessness and for the ratification, domestication, and implementation of the UN Convention relating to the status of stateless persons and the United Nations Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. 2. To strengthen collaboration between the regional and national parliamentary bodies with a view to enhancing the capacity of parliamentarians to harmonize conflicting laws at the national level that this directly causes. 3. Formulate a model law on statelessness through the Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution as a means to promote legislative frameworks on the prevention and eradication of statelessness in Africa. 4. Mandate the Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution to work with all technical partners and all relevant institutional stakeholders, including civil society organizations, in the formulation of the proposed model law on statelessness, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the development of a model law on cooperatives in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves as follows. 1. Approve the proposal for the development of a model legislation on cooperatives in Africa. 2. Mandates the Committee on Finance and Monetary Affairs to lead the formulation of the proposed model law, taking into account the diverse legal traditions existing on the African continent, and to present the draft model law for consideration by the plenary of the Pan-African Parliament. Further mandate the Committee on Monetary and Financial Affairs to ensure that the relevant departments of the African Union Commission, regional economic communities, and civil society organizations are meaningfully involved in the formulation process of the model law on cooperatives. 4. Welcome the proposal, collaboration, and support from Cooperatives Africa in the formulation of the proposed model law on cooperatives in Africa, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022. Draft resolution on the development of a model legislation on factoring in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament now hereby resolves to approve the proposal for the development of a model legislation on factoring in Africa. 2. Mandate the Committee on Finance and Monetary Affairs to lead the formulation of the proposed model legislation, taking into account the diverse legal traditions within the African continent, and to present the draft model legislation for consideration by the plenary of the Pan-African Parliament. 3. Further mandate the Committee on Monetary and Financial Affairs to ensure that the relevant departments of the African Union Commission, regional economic communities, and civil society organizations are meaningfully involved in the formulation process of the model law on factoring. 4. Welcome the proposal, collaboration, and support from Afreximbank and the African Capacity Building Foundation in the formulation of the proposed model legislation on factoring in Africa, adopted in Midrand, South Africa, 10 November 2022.
Nous passons à présent au projet de recommandation.
Recommendations. Recommendations of 2022 High-Level Parliamentary Dialogue on Democracy, Human Rights and Governance in Africa under the theme of the unconstitutional changes in government and political transitions in Africa. So the Pan-African Parliament decides as follows. Condemn the external forces perpetrating conflict in Africa in countries such as the DRC, Mozambique, and the Sahel region. 2. Ensure the establishment of coordinated early monitoring and intervention mechanism to identify countries likely to experience coups and intervene in order to prevent the coups beyond sharing information with member states and the expectation that regional economic communities should take the lead. 3. Call on the AU to consistently apply serious and targeted sanctions to perpetrators of coups as a deterrent to potential perpetrators of unconstitutional changes of all kinds of governments. Call on AU heads of state to reaffirm their commitment at the continental level through the ratification of instruments and swift action in dealing with unconstitutional changes of governments. 5. Call on AU member states to ratify AU normative instruments, particularly the Malabo Protocol. 6. Call on the AU to strengthen the electoral observer missions, which should adopt a holistic approach in election observation to incorporate the pre-election, election and post-election developments and follow up the implementation of the recommendations to cover the gaps identified during the missions. 7. Call on the AU to focus on technical assistance to election management organizations with the view of building capacity and enhancing their ability to deliver free and fair elections without bias. 8. Call on the AU to collaborate with civil society organizations to provide an alternative avenue for citizens to voice out their concerns and hold their governments accountable, to complement state structures aimed at triggering mechanisms for self-correction in political systems. 9. Mobilize the Pan-African Parliament in advocating for the ratification of AU normative instruments against unconstitutional changes of government, as well as the promotion of democracy and the rule of law. 10. Impress upon the AUC and AU member states to intensify efforts in developing and implementing socio-economic programs aimed at achieving the inclusion of women and the youth as a way of preventing the loss of trust between the citizens and the political system, which was one of the main drivers of unconstitutional change of government. 11. Urge member states to strengthen governance, institutions, and national accountability mechanisms to allow the general public to hold governments to account and demand reforms as a way of ensuring that governments enjoy sustained trust of the citizenry. 12. Call upon the African Union to set up a Pan-African Institute to bring together African experts to interrogate and make recommendations in addressing challenges affecting the continent, including unconstitutional change of government. 13. Urge the African Union to set up a Pan-African force as a standing army to intervene in resolving conflicts, including the unconstitutional change of governments. 14. Urge the African Union to set up an African Criminal Court by extending the mandate of the African Court of Justice to try the perpetrators of crimes against humanity, adopted in Midrand, 10th November 2022. Recommendations on the 13th meeting on the right of women. 1. Call upon government to give priority to preparing national action plan to fight against violence against women and girls in their national strategy. Request parliamentarians to promote campaigns and sensitization campaign to encourage change in the social behavior and cultural behaviors with regard to the roles of women and men, and to do away with behavior that engenders violence against women, in particular the introduction of instructions on equality between women and men. 3. Calls upon the Pan-African Parliament to consider these so that we're able to get to the realizations of the Millennium Objectives, and congratulate member countries which ratify the protocol, the Maputo Protocol, and calls upon countries which have not done so to ratify it, and especially the 12 countries that are still are yet to ratify it. 5. Call upon government to their government to accelerate the process of signature and ratification and implementation of mechanisms for the integration of the protocol, the Maputo Protocol, in national legislations. 6. Call upon all African women to mobilize in order to popularize through media wherever they are. And then 7, invite member countries to adopt these national and solemn declarations between men and women, and to ratify the Maputo Protocol. 8, congratulate countries which have adopted the implementation of laws on women's rights and equality, and encourages government and countries which have not yet adopted it to do so as without delay. 9, urge women parliamentarians to contribute to decisions making on issues relating to social matters, and making sure that these laws then can contribute to strengthening the rights of women and equality at all levels of government and in political parties. 10, urge member states to ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AFCFTA, and call upon them to put in place programs to empower women to actively participate in free trade and opt for gender-sensitive policies to enhance inclusion. 11, encourage the Pan-African Parliament to adopt a model law to combat gender-based discrimination and to punish sexual harassment against women and girls. 12, call upon parliamentarians to monitor the negotiations, implementation and impact of the AFCFTA with a particular focus on women's participation, and to create an enabling environment for investment in women and youth-led businesses to meet the standards, quality and scale required to supply major players. 13, invite national parliaments to enhance and promote the active engagement and participation of women and youth in policy making, implementation of the AFCFTA, and to develop interventions targeting informal cross-border trade with a view to protecting women's trade and encouraging their formalization. 14, invite states to relax the criteria for obtaining funding for income-generating activities for women and youth in order to fight poverty through the promotion of economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, finance, and gender-responsive budgeting. 15, invite states to promote policies to support cooperatives that provide key employment and merge women's organizations, create and support accelerator centers for women's initiatives. Sixteen, encourage government to intensify incentives for the inclusion of women and youth in cooperative activities and the informal economy in rural areas. 17, urge governments to initiate training programs for women and young entrepreneurs in the use of digital tools and allocate resources that encompass technology, new media platforms, social networks, and improve access to trade finance by developing financial instruments adapted to the business activities of women and youth. 18, request PAP
17. Invite states, encourage governments, urge governments. What do you mean by states? And what do you mean by government? I'm not inviting debate, but the drafters, can you be smarter? Are these member states? Because when you go to Nigeria, there are states, federal states. Are we including, we just say states? I think in the language of the union, you say member states. So then, is there deliberate, when we encourage governments, these are not states? Okay, when you do the final document, can you look at that? Continue.
Bien noté, Monsieur le Président. Numéro 18.
Noted, Mr. President. Urge the Pan-African Parliament through the Women's Caucus to develop appropriate mechanisms in national parliaments and with civil society for the implementation of resolutions and recommendation adopted. Then I request PAP to acquire for Women Caucus artwork symbolizing violence against women as a constant reminder of the inaudible voice of women who suffer domestic violence, psychological violence, violence in conflict zone, human trafficking, trafficking of children and women for sexual purposes. 19, urge the Pan-African Parliament through the Women Caucus to develop appropriate mechanisms in national parliament and with civil society for the implementation of the resolution and recommendations adopted in Midrand 10th November 2022.
Sorry, Honorable Dow.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I want to make some global remark. Lorsque nous avons adopté les résolutions,
when we adopted these resolutions, I just wanted to draw your attention on the fact that some resolutions were adopted on the 11th, some on the 10th. So maybe it would be proper that we harmonize them so that all resolutions were adopted on the 10th of November. Now, with regard to the drafting of the French text, the recommendations in question, there I would wish to see the French text reviewed, because they say the Pan-African Parliament decides, and so on and so on. So it's just a grammatical change that applies to the French. So there's an adjustment to be made in terms of the manner in which the verb has been conjugated. Thank you. Right Honourable President.
I think that is noted.
Mr. President,
I'm trying to
in the
see.
middle.
Oh yes, Ossie.
Thank you.
Honorable Sleiman.
Yes, on 18, request PAP to acquire for the women's.
We are not hearing you because you are seated.
Thank you. Mr. President, I don't understand 18.
18.
I don't know what do they mean by this resolution. Request PAP to acquire for the Women's Caucus, art symbolizing violence against women as a constant reminder of the inaudible voice of women who suffer domestic violence, psychological violence, violence in conflict zone, human trafficking, trafficking of children and women for sexual purpose. What will PAP acquire? But it's not the language here is not clear.
Request PAP. Can plenary request PAP? Or PAP is the plenary? We are PAP. We are the parliament as we sit. So who do we request? I think it's a language issue. In fact, you don't request, you call upon the bureau. You call upon the bureau to acquire. Fine, let's move.
Je m'excuse. Projet de recommandation sur la migration de main-d'œuvre en Afrique. Le Parlement panafricain.
So, recommendation on labor migration in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament, considering Article 17 of the Constitutive Act of the African Union on the establishment of the Pan-African Parliament to ensure the full participation of African peoples in the development and economic integration of the continent. So to take measures to ensure their implementation and sharing good practices between member states of the African Union. B, implement human rights-based and gender-responsive laws, policies and strategies, conclude interstate agreements including bilateral labor agreements where necessary to govern and facilitate safe, dignified and regular migration, including labor migration. C, strengthen the capacity of the labor migration policy makers, administrators, and institutions in the field of international labor standards, decent work, skills, and qualification, recognition, social protection, and promoting regular pathways through efficient labor migration governance. Adopted in Midrand, South Africa on the 10th of November 2022.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Right Honorable President, each time we speak about migration, I think we shouldn't limit ourselves to addressing migration between African countries, because we have a large African community outside Africa. So why don't we support one another and try to have the necessary togetherness where we can support those who live under very trying conditions, where there's racism and all manner of difficulties. Because when we talk about migration in this audience, I think we should not lose sight of those who live outside the borders of the continent. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a comment. It's a comment, and I don't think the clerk would even respond to that. It's a contribution which I believe amounts to the improvement of the text, if that is agreeable. That let's not limit migration issues to the continent of Africa. It should cover even beyond Africa. Is that an agreeable position? If it's agreed, the drafters will incorporate Mr. Clark.
Monsieur le Président, je voudrais juste...
Honorable President, I want to draw the attention of the audience that this text does not address only migration within Africa.
Order, if you want the floor, you can again request for it. So, sorry, Mr. Craig, what did you say?
Je disais que...
I was saying that the recommendation is quite specific because it relates only to migration of labor. So if we want to talk about migration in general terms, then the issue should be sent back to the competent committee which drafted this resolution. Thank you, sir.
Honorable Azadin.
Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, je ne...
Right, Honorable. Sorry, Mr. Clark, I was not talking about this resolution that you are proposing to the Assembly. I was talking in general terms. I say that the Pan-African Parliament ought to give a serious consideration to the situation of those who live outside the borders of the continent. Thank you.
In fact, this matter can even become more complicated. What does in Africa and within Africa mean? What is the difference? If you migrate in Africa, are you migrating within Africa? We have migrants in Africa who cross.
I'm in Parliament.
We go cross and go into Europe, for example, the Mediterranean cases. Are they covered here? If you want to cover only those, do we say labor migration within Africa or in Africa? It's a topic in Africa. So if you want to complicate it further, the grammar can become more complicated. And it can even include even those migrating outside Africa. Because these are migrations in Africa. And if I say give statistics of migrations in Africa, that those statistics will include those who left Africa. Those are migrations in Africa. People who are migrating in Africa does not mean that they all end up in Africa. Some end up in Europe, but they are migrating in Africa. So that's saying the language of the committee maybe. Professor, Honorable Professor.
Honorable President and distinguished members, can we simplify the matter by accepting that the diaspora is the 6th region of the AU? And therefore, I agree with Honorable Member that this is not the matter that must go back to the committee. The committee reports to us. We have to correct it here in support of what the Honorable Member is raising.
I see, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since we are talking about recommendations on labor migration in Africa, we all know that Africa, there are constraints in migration to move from one country to another. I think we need to have a strong recommendation about this African passport so that people can easily migrate from one country to another without hindrance. So this report is our report. Now it's submitted to us. Recommendation is our recommendation. We can add or we can reduce. I don't think it's wrong for us to look into it and come up with a sound recommendation or to beef it up for the betterment of all of us as Africans. But this African passport must be highlighted. If not, our migrants will move from one country to another and they will become illegal migrants, arrested, detained. We have other issues. So it's high time PAP make a strong recommendation about this African passport.
Thank you for being more specific about the African passport. Ms. Clerk, the floor is to yours. Have you concluded?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Right Honorable President. I think I've come to the end of the presentation on recommendations and presentations. The recommendation requested by the plenary following the motion on the conflict in the DRC, I think we're going to put it in the archives and will then brought it before you at the appropriate time. For the moment, this is the sum of the presentation and recommendations emanating from the work of the plenary. Thank you, sir.
To conclude, I now put final recommendations and resolutions as amended of the first ordinary session of the 6th Parliament for
Point
adoption.
Point of order, President.
Are we agreed to? Have we adopted?
Point of order.
No, yes, take your seat first, Honorable. We are adopting those that have been presented. So can we adopt those that have been presented?
With amendments or?
With amendments, yes. With amendments. Honorable Majodina, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Honorable President. Honorable President, I wanted to submit to you that we have finalized the assignment on the DRC motion on the resolve part. It is with Madam Wawa. Thank you.
Oh, Madam Wawa has the document. It's on the phone.
President.
You've just received it.
President.
Yes, is that point of order?
No, like Honorable Majodini, I just wanted to say that in consultation with the delegation of Mozambique and the delegation of Tanzania, we submitted the final
improvements.
The improvements, yes.
Yeah, they are noted. They came in, we saw them, so they will be included. Right, how do we proceed, Madam Wawa?
So the last part of the...
Honorable Majodina to come and read. Right, what then we do, can I suggest as you go up, can we have a 5-minute break only We then come back and do the closing ceremony. Sorry, I've already announced. Can we come back at 22 to 12, 20 to 12, 10 minutes? We would then do that and do the closing ceremony. 10 minutes break, 22, we are back. If not 5 minutes.
hold for us African youth?
After graduating from college, is securing a job certain?
I want to further my education. Why shouldn't I leave this country to seek other opportunities?
As an aspiring fashion designer who would like to trade in textile all over Africa, how do I get funding for my business?
Trade? Are we even sure of economic stability? As for me, I just want to expand our family farm and set up a food processing company. But how can I easily transport and sell my goods to other African countries?
Have you not heard of Agenda 2063?
What is Agenda 2063?
Agenda 2063 is the master plan for transforming Africa into a global powerhouse of the future by the year 2063, and ensuring that Africa's development is driven by investments that are sustainable and benefits all people, and that development activities will promote unity, self-determination, freedom, progress, and collective prosperity, pursued under the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. Do you know Agenda 2063 aims to increase investment in key infrastructure, improved agricultural practices, and better management of our natural resources, as well as access to quality health and education to enable Africans to unlock their full potential? And with a well-educated society and empowered people, our communities will thrive as Africans actively participate in decision-making to promote good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, and the right to live in stable and peaceful societies. And a peaceful and secure Africa will provide the right environment we desire for development, productive employment, and decent work for all. We can build more world-class infrastructure.
Right, order in the house, order in the chamber, order in the chamber, order in the chamber. We conclude business. Yeah. We want to conclude by 12. We want to conclude by 12. So that members have enough time. Members have enough time to go for lunch and move from their hotels to the new venue, which I don't know by now, of course. Where are we going? Where is it? In what? Is it center or 4 ways? Okay, in 4 ways. Right, let's get settled and do the last of the rituals and close by 12. You can see we are now about 12. Let's close. So we invite Honorable Majodina.
Thank you very much, Honorable President, Honorable Vice President, Honorable members of this august House. I will just shoot to the resolve part. The Pan-African Parliament resolved to support Luanda, Bujumbura and Nairobi peace initiative aimed at resolving the conflict. Further resolved to support all various efforts by multilateral and AU which are aimed at bringing peace and stability in DRC and the Great Lakes region. Resolved to call upon the involved parties to respect the principle as espoused by Article 4, B, E, F, G, H, I, and O of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. Further resolved to call upon DRC and Rwanda delegates represented in the Pan-African Parliament to use dialogue with all stakeholders in the conflict as a means of finding the lasting solution. Resolved to mandate the PAP to follow up on peace process in DRC, adopted at Midrand on the 10th of November 2022. I so moved.
Listening to the resolution, I think it's a very good one because it's simply calling on the parties to the conflict to pursue dialogue and also to call upon Pan-African Parliament to take a keen interest and deploy itself and assist. So thank you very much. It is resolved. Now it becomes resolved because we are resolving, we are saying the two parties, Rwanda and DRC, should keep engaged based on the Rwanda-Nairobi initiatives. We should pursue those initiatives further, and the Pan-African Parliament should also ensure, whether I should say monitor, whether I should say, but it's more of monitoring. They should not say oversee, but monitor to see that things are happening. I think that is well resolved and agreed to. I have some announcements to make. Honorable Mahamat, Dr. Mahamat Anadif, can you rise, stand up? He's there. If you can see him. Yes. He has written 2 books, a member of parliament. One book's title is Landmarks in Arabic Literature in Chad. and he has given me that book. It's in Arabic. I can assure you I'll read it. And the second book, a glossary of proverbs and adages in Chadian Arabic. Again, I promise to read this one. Now, he is saying, please, as MPs, read these books. And further, what else? Sorry? Right, he's also very kind. He's donating some copies to our library at PAP. Close. I will ask the clerk to make announcements.
Announcement. This is about the Women's Caucus meeting just after this plenary. The meeting will take place in the chamber. Thank you.
Right. We do all the announcements before we close. Sorry. Honorable members, as we close, this afternoon, members will leave their hotels to go to the venue for the strategic planning workshop starting tomorrow, officially it ends on Sunday. If we finish earlier on Saturday, fine, but officially we finish on Sunday, which means Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. As I mentioned earlier this morning, others had not arrived. We have a total of 45 members in the chamber today, 45. Sorry? They want to
chairperson and the vice chairperson, they're already in the previous list.
Okay,
This is addition.
don't worry. Oh, these are outside the list.
Yes.
These are not members of,
The bureaus.
these are not in the bureaucracies.
Yes, yes.
45.
Yes.
So the members are very few then. What is the total number in this chamber today? I don't think we exceed 60. No. Very good. Right, very good. The number for bureaucracies, bureau and bureaucracies is 53. Am I right?
Yes.
It's 53.
Yes.
We are less than 60 here. No, we are not. I don't know. We are less than 60. If we did a count earlier on. But the point is, listen to the point. The point is the number of people who are in bureaucracies in this hall now. They are less than 20. They are less than 20. Yet the number for bureaucracies is 53, 60. So, and I know some of you have tickets that cannot be changed. You have to leave tonight, some will leave tomorrow, Friday. So this number will end up below 50, I know. I know a few that have to leave on Saturday. Now, if your ticket allows you to be changed, if your parliament can change your ticket to, let's say, Sunday, Monday, you are welcome. But, and also, if you are only leaving on Sunday, please come and attend the bureaucracy's strategic planning meeting. You are invited with accommodation tonight, free, tomorrow free, up to I think Sunday, free. As I mentioned, there is press here, I don't want media, I don't want to talk too much. What I know is you will be given either 1 cent or 10 million, I don't know, for attending. So you are all invited, whether you are a rapporteur chairman or not a chairman, not a rapporteur, you are all invited if you are able to attend. And that means you check out from your hotel today and list yourself. The list is here of members that are not in the bureaucracies. So this will guide our staff. All those on this list are invited. I think it's clear. It's clear to all of you. But I can allow a question. You know, some of these issues need to be explained and people understand. That if you are not in the bureau, member of the bureaucracies, if you are not a rapporteur, vice chair, chair, you are still invited to the meeting of the strategic planning for your committees after all. So you will be very relevant in those meetings. So you will be planning, your own committee will be representing its plan and you can make a contribution. Some of your chairs are not here, your vice chairs are not here, so you would even be very, very helpful to the whole situation. We can now get into closing this nice
venue.
Oh, is that Honorable Sulaiman? You want to say something?
Yeah, I'm asking you about the venue. We are not clear about the venue.
All right, the venue, the buses would pick you from hotels. I don't know what time. I don't know what time. We always say this afternoon. I don't know what time. But the venue is Indaba. Indaba Hotel in 4 ways. Indaba. Indaba in 4 ways. Indaba in 4 ways. Yes, that's correct. The buses will come to all the hotels after lunch. What I don't know is whether it's 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know. At 3 o'clock. Now, 3. 3 is good, eh? Some want 3, some want 4, some want 5, some want 6.
I propose 4 o'clock because
4 o'clock, put up your hands. 5 o'clock, put up your hands. 3 o'clock, put up your hands. 3 has lost.
6 o'clock.
3 has lost. 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock. Oh, I didn't want 6, but 6 is winning. No, 4 o'clock. No, we are telling management 6 o'clock. That's what they prefer. The majority have said 6. Order, I said we close by 12. It's 5 minutes to 12. If you continue talking until it is 12 o'clock, then we will close without a speech. Thank you. I stand here, honorable members, members of the Great Bureau. I want to call it the Great Bureau. Members of the Great Bureau. And I want to start from the Great Bureau. As leading this bureau, I'm enjoying the way we are delivering and working together. Teams where there are more than 2-3 people, it's not easy to pull together always. It's not easy because individuals have their own. In other language, we call them transferences. Individuals have got what we call transferences. That means unique backgrounds. So it's not easy sometimes to bring everybody together. And let me start by saying there is something called a hedgehog. A hedgehog it's like a porcupine, but it's smaller than a porcupine. But it also has some thorns on the side. You may know, some of you may not know it, some may know. It's called a hedgehog in English, but there's some thorns. So when it is cold, the hedgehogs try to come closer to share the warmth. But when they come too close, their thorns, they bite each other. So then they have to keep some distance again. Then it gets much colder. They come back, then the thorns start biting another. So they keep getting the distance. That's about teamwork. In teams, sometimes when we come closer, sometimes we start again biting each other, and then we have we come closer. But that's the art of teamwork. Teamwork, we have to work for it. For the Bureau, we are working for it and it's working. We are moving on. In my speech, I want to say we are happy this Parliament, I think, is moving. The feedback that we are getting already, not only from this, from even outside, people are now very optimistic about Pan-African Parliament. We need now to live according to those expectations. We defined our road and our direction. We held our workshop, we did our reviving, renewing, repositioning, and indeed we are repositioning. And we want to move in with a better image of this Parliament. And as individuals and collectively, wherever we are, let's make sure that we are perceived as a new Parliament and we move on. And members should always be reminded that we are the ones who make Pan-African Parliament work or break the way we behave. I'm very happy. The numbers on this day are quite, if I compare sometimes to some of the sessions in the past, on the day like this one, those who know, there would have been half of what is here today. The number is good. And we need to encourage and motivate those who are here. And I want to be very bold and say we have taken your names. I have the list of people who have persevered to this hour. And I want to be very honest. There are people who attended for 4 days, but they want to say, Mr. President, there's a trip to Brussels. Why am I not on the list? You go to Brussels, but you don't even attend the sittings. Mr. President, there's an election observer mission in Equatorial Guinea. I want to be there. But you are not even in this room now. No, these are facts. I think we have to, caucus chairpersons, we ask you to nominate people to go to missions. And I think you'll be sensitive to this one. And I think as a Bureau will be observing some of the names that you will be giving us that are not even on the list. Reward these people who are here. Reward them. And we have a list, and it doesn't happen one day, but we'll be trying to follow that list and also see such people should also be rewarded in undertaking some missions, because everybody wants to go on those missions. So this session, I want to repeat, you all know we did the theme on agriculture, security, food security. We did a lot. But I think the high points, the highest point was when we had our former President Obasanjo himself standing where I'm standing and delivering. Of course, we had the support, the Commonwealth Secretary General who came and supported us, and everyone else that we invited. You have been very good. You have done your model laws. We won't complain too much about, we are not legislative, but let's do what, at least the powers that we have been given. Let's show that we can use those powers. And the model laws that we are working on shows that we are committed. We managed to adopt our own laws. Laws, call them rules of procedure. I think we should agree that that was historical. The way we agreed, unanimity in endorsing our rules of procedure, that we avoided acrimony. We now have rules of procedure. The AU Legal Council has been in touch. They are very excited because they want to also report in February